In order to understand the shroud, one must first understand resurrection. And what better place to start than the Bible? It's the only written account we have. There is, however, more to reading the Bible than knowing how to read. Literal interpretation is the archenemy of creative thought. What does the Bible say about what took place inside Jesus' tomb on the first Easter Sunday? The evangelists seem to have known there was more to the story than what their first century audience had the capacity to absorb. So they left little dangling threads in their accounts that could be used in the future to extract truth when time was ripe for acceptance, as it is now. So, when freed from literalism, the gospel accounts of Jesus' resurrection suggest a radiation release took place in the tomb, evidenced by the telltale presence of light. Important here is Einstein's equation E equal mc squared. It's a game changer. Jesus' body was, like mine and yours are, and everything else is, primordial energy E assembled into bulk and form M. A human body vanishing from sight is an energy transformation event wherein M returns to primordiality E. This, of course, would have been impossible for a God-intoxicated first century audience to accept. As it turns out, it's also difficult for a 21st century audience too. That's another story. And so the evangelists injected a dose of divine involvement for audience appeal, but left a few dangling threads to indicate there's more to the story. Matthew's account is the most telling. He says, "And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, approached, rolled back the stone, and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow." Now, I'm not into talking winged creatures swooping down out of the sky like a flash of lightning, wearing snow-white clothing, landing in such a way as to trigger an earthquake. To me, Matthew's account, taken literally, has a comic book action figure quality to it. Shazam! A winged creature appears like a bolt of lightning, and the earth shakes on arrival. Then the creature ambles to the tomb, pushes back the entry stone, and sits on it. We're being told that a non-physical creature did physical things. He approached, rolled back the stone, and then sat upon it. Additionally, he spoke in local dialect. And we are to believe this is what took place on the first Easter Sunday morning? I don't think so. I may have been born yesterday, but I wasn't born last night. Yeah. Per the passage, the angel wore snow-white clothing. The English word white is a translation of the Greek word lukon. The definition of lukon isn't limited to white, as in the absence of color. It also has a bright, flashy dimension to it. The concept of bright and flashy clothing and like lightning appearance go together. Visualize a sudden flash of light. So, after landing in a commotion, the mysterious angel then rolled back the entry stone to the tomb, revealing that Jesus' crucified corpse was missing. In other words, Jesus' corpse vanished from sight even though the entry to the tomb was sealed. What's taking place here? Did Jesus' entombed body have the ability to walk through a stone wall, or did it radiate away? Radiating away is the most logical choice, and it has happened many times in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Was the radiation release powerful enough to dislodge the entry stone? Or did the guards stationed at the tomb, startled by a flash of light, roll it away? what actually happened? A modern view of Matthew's account would read like this. So, there was an energy release within the tomb. For behold, there was a lightning-like flash of light and a strong shaking of the earth, which dislodged the entry stone, revealing the tomb was empty. Jesus' body vanished from sight by returning to its primal energy state in accordance with Einstein's famous equation. Yeah. Now, Mark and Luke's Gospels also tell of the presence of light in the tomb, but add a little measure of naturalism in both accounts, as the early morning visitors found young men. Men, mind you, not heaven-sent angels, 1 in Mark, 2 in Luke. The Gospels are written in Greek, which has a word for angel, angelos. Thus, the evangelists had language to place angels in the tomb, but wrote of men, natural creatures instead. This had to have been a conscious decision. But why? Why were natural creatures used to announce the obvious? The crucified corpse vanished from sight in a light display. Mark's mystery man wore white clothing. Like Matthew, he too used the Greek word lukon to describe the color. And as noted, the word embeds the quality as bright and brilliant. Luke's 2 men were also dressed in flashy clothing. However, he used the Greek word astrapatosi, connoting in English a flash of lightning. It was sunrise, so surely it was dark inside the tomb. Thus, the dazzling clothing wasn't from reflected sunlight. It had to have been internally generated. Strangely, Luke's 2 men weren't in the tomb when the visitors first arrived. They suddenly appeared out of nowhere and began speaking. Men wearing dazzling clothing suddenly emerged from out of nowhere and spoke in the local dialect. What in the world is going on in these accounts? What are the evangelists really trying to tell us? John's Gospel is probably written in the 90s, AD 90s, also suggests the presence of light in the tomb. In John, 2 angels were found seated at opposite ends of the burial slab, both dressed in the familiar, dazzling, flashy clothing described as lukon in Greek. The opposite seating on the burial slab suggests the presence of light along the entire length of the slab. And as in Luke, the angels were not present on the first look-see into the tomb. They appeared suddenly on the third look. So what do you think took place? Creatures at Jesus' tomb, sometimes natural men, sometimes heavenly angels, wearing flashy white clothing, able to move around and speak, plus an indication that the earth shook. Are the glowing creatures the vehicles the evangelists used to communicate the presence of light that the sources told them about? Remember, the evangelists were not eyewitnesses to the resurrection, and their audience was God intoxicated. Their information sources are unknown, and all we have to go on are copies of the original work. We know not to what extent, if any, the originals were modified. The New Testament is not a history book. It is a book that weaves history into the Christology that early Christian theologians pursued and which evolved to what we celebrate today. So, the gospel accounts remind us once again, there's more to reading the Bible than knowing how to read. The accounts invite further inquiry into resurrection as a light-emitting energy release event. Of course, a second century God-intoxicated audience would have been unaccepting of a storyline where a human body radiated away in a flash of light. the time was just not right for disclosure at that point in history. So in constructing the intended Christology, the evangelists added divine involvement to the appeal of their audience, but left a few dangling threads so the incident could be re-examined when the time was ripe, like it is now. The evangelists embellished their storyline by adding post-death apparitions, creating the impression that a real, live, breathing body was seen outside the tomb on the first Easter Sunday. And it was the same body that was laid to rest inside the tomb on the previous Friday afternoon. The facts on the ground don't support the apparition accounts. This is yet another dangling thread in the resurrection story, and I will speak to it in a future lecture. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you the next time.